I want to mention Al Gray, by the way. Al, because I went to sit in with Al Gray at that place. It's on the tip of my tongue. And, he said, hang out with the cats. That's what you got to do, that sort of. But I hired him as a guest artist early in the book, late '89, to come in and play with Shirley. And Nelson, who's a critic, came in to see Al Gray because he loved Al Gray. He's playing there, and that was a revelation too, hearing, standing next to Al Gray and hearing him play and everything. So anyhow, he went back to Nelson and he said, if you write about any place, write about this place. So that helped us because every once in a while Nelson would give us a play, in the paper, in the daily news.
All right. Well, that brings me to the next. How did you advertise? I mean, did you go big time or was
no?
Okay.
Well, I did several junctures. I did spots on WRTI. I advertised, of course, in Fred Miles' little paper.
Do you have any copies of that?
Oh, I have them all in. A lot of them are here. Yeah.
Oh, we were looking for that.
A lot of them are here, and they're not all in one place. Yeah, Abundant Sounds. Yeah. I did a little strip advertisement in the City Paper and the Philadelphia Weekly. So I advertised City Paper, Philadelphia Weekly. Yeah, there's Sammy.
Yeah, he was pulling on you.
Hey, Sammy.
Hey, Sammy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, I had something else. Now, just give me an idea of the bartenders that people remember the most, if you can remember them.
Sure.
Because people are going to wonder about that later on.
Peggy had worked for the previous, and you know about Peggy McGinnis. She was the daytime bartender for the previous owner. So then, Sammy, get down. So then, I kept her on, and she was a daytime bartender for me when we kept a lunch program, which was for about 6 or 8 years until '95. So then she moved to nights. So everybody knows Peggy. Everybody loves Peggy. She made great stingers and martinis, and then Una and Joey. I think most people really think of Una and Joey. And Joey passed away a little while ago, maybe 6 or 8 years ago. Una passed away just months before COVID hit, and I often wonder whether it was it was New Year's Eve she got sick, before it hit. But the way she described the symptoms, I saw it on Facebook. She said it hit her like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, I wonder if it was a early onset. But anyhow, Una was probably, bartenders are like showmen. She would make her Long Island iced teas holding 3 bottles in one hand and 2 in the other and pour them like that, She was great. Ask Gordon Evans. He loved her Long Island iced teas. And there were other bartenders. There was Zeke and his partner, who I can't remember what the other guy's name was, but there were different ones over the years.
Now, I wanted to ask you this because I'm doing timeline bios for the website for Jazz.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And I've just finished researching Shirley Scott. And
right.
I wanted to ask you when she stopped playing at your club because of the fen thing. Can you talk a little bit about her struggles with that? Or
Yes.
Did she bring that to you?
Yes. She was intermittent.
Gonna be all right. Should we take a minute?
I can live with it.
Yeah. Okay.
We
We talked about it earlier. He's fun. He's funny. She was there solid from. I'm giving you more than you're asking, but she was there solid from 87 on through about 92 or 93, and then she was doing some work at teaching and going to school at Cheney, so she became more like coming in for 2 weeks at a time, backing up Tim and Terell, and then maybe Cecil Payne and Evelyn and blah blah blah. So she was there on and off, and she was sometimes not that much. So she also became involved in the Bill Cosby show, and she was a little bit less at that period of time, whenever that was. But she was just coming back into Ortliebs a little bit more often, and I'd say it was 96, 97, and I think it was in 98, 1998. She had been in there for a month or two before, but in November she was coming in with Tim and Terell, and then they were going to Japan.
People who are listening to this 100 years from now aren't going to know who Tim and
Tim,
Terell are.
she was. Thank you, because my girlfriend told me to say who these people are. What wisdom! Thank you.
Just interject that.
Yeah.
So Shirley was coming back in with Tim Warfield and Terell Stafford, and they were planning to do a tour, I believe, to Japan immediately after the week or weekend or 2 weeks that they were going to be in Ortliebs, and this was in November of '98. And I think she called in sick right then, and that's when it happened, that she was ill. I can look back at my calendars and get back to you for whether that was indeed the case. In fact, do you want me to look right now?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
we can wait on that.
All right.
You know,
You have like all your calendars
Mm-hmm.
from the whole period?
Yeah, except there's big gaps. There's big gaps. Which
I knew you would have all this stuff.
Yeah.
I just had a feeling you
Yeah.
were so meticulous. So, okay. Did you accommodate her illness in any way when she got really ill, or did she just stop playing for a while?
No, she couldn't play. I did go up to New York. You know, she was close with tenor and baritone saxophonist Charles Davis, and he appeared at my club a number of times. She was pretty close with him, and we were talking about something after she got ill, and I went up to see Barry Harris when he was at a club there, not the Whippoorwill, another club that they were playing at quite often, and got the sheet music to Nascimento by Barry Harris, and because we had been talking about it, and I brought it back down and I took it to her in the apartment she was living in near Wilmington, off of the 495 thing. I took that down to her, and that was one of the last time. That was probably the last time I talked to her. But this was when she was fairly ill. But no, there was she talked about trying to come back to play, but once she was on the oxygen and everything, I think she was too weak. She came into the club once. I remember she came into the club one time after she was, and she wanted to get back to playing, but of course it was a progressive disease too. It's heartbreaking.
And we really didn't talk about it, but maybe you want to talk about exactly what it was that was happening. She was taking a medication.
Well, what happened? Yes, so Shirley Scott asked her physician. You know, I think she wanted to lose some weight, and he advised her to take a medication, and it was something called fen-phen, and she did, and apparently it caused a condition which is called cardiopulmonary fibrosis. Am I correct about that? I think it was called cardiopulmonary fibrosis, which is hardening of the capillaries in the lungs. So there was sort of once it hit, there was very little that could be done to solve the problem. No remediation. But it was devastating. It was devastating, and she did. They had a class action lawsuit which they did, and she did win She was one of the people that won the class action lawsuit.
Yeah, against the company and the doctor.
Is that right?
Yeah, $8 million.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that killed her at 67.
Yeah, it ended her career, yeah.
Yeah.
Ended her career and killed her.
Okay, now tell me when running the club was getting a little bit much for you, and you were kind of coming to a conclusion. Give me an idea when you were deciding, gee, maybe Well,
Margaret and I were, I mean, it it got difficult even by the mid-90s already, and she was urging me to sell it back then. I'd say about 1998 already, but of course I resisted that, and then we got separated, and then we got divorced, and then I moved upstairs at Ortliebs at about 2000, and that's when some of these things took place that were a little bit of a sort of an energy, a shot in the arm. You know, that one documentary that I was telling Jason about, the documentary that James McGillen did, and the double CD that Mike Boone and Roger Prieto put together. But by about 2006 or 7, I started to realize that I couldn't keep doing it for too long. And part of the problem was a health issue. I had a severe go-kart injury, which altered my life in many ways when I was a senior in high school. Triple compound fracture of my left leg. And it altered any visions I have being a basketball player or a bass, or anything really. And as is often the case, those things later in your life, I had a really compromised area in my leg, in my lower leg. A lot of scar tissue, and it would break down a little bit with I guess what you would call a sore, an open wound. So there were 2 times I had this earlier, and one time I wound up in the hospital with an infection, like the kind of thing that killed Jim Henson. It went right up the leg, and they had me on IV vancomycin and stuff. That was probably the middle 90s, but in 2006, I had a time again where this thing opened up, and I went to the doctors, down at Jefferson, and they treated it, and the wound specialist, and they were working, and the nurse said to me, it was more hard to get it to heal that time, and we finally did, but she said, stress is really makes it harder for wounds to heal, and it creates. So I'm like, stress, okay, well, I'm under. So that was sort of the, there were other underlying factors, finances, other things. The developer in Northern Liberties was making my life miserable.
Wow.
Oh, and every way you could possibly imagine that somebody could do it. Do you want to know,
Yeah.
if I say who this is?
Blumenthal?
No, Blatstein.
Bart Blatstein.
He bought the property. Okay, so my confidant and girlfriend, she said, don't name names. So if it's advisable to cut that out, cut it out.
This is for history, though.
Right, I know. Yeah.
There's nothing you can do.
It's up to you.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can show me like later on. But anyhow, Bart Blatstein bought all the brewery property. I was landlocked on 3 sides by all that stuff. So he immediately put up a fence. This is 2000 or 2001. He immediately put up a fence, fenced off the parking area. Remember that? Yeah. I called him up. I says, wait. Why? My insurance people said we can't let people park there, which was baloney, So it was that. That made my life more difficult. It was a nice amenity there, I used to pay them $200 to rent the first guy, and then Blatstein. I paid the people who owned the property $200. It was originally Joe Ortlieb, and then it was the guy that bought the property after him, and then it was Blatstein. And then there were other things. They almost totally destroyed my building, knocking the building next door down. Shut me down for a whole weekend, and but then they started. I almost think of it as persecution, and I'm sorry to say that they would ticket the cars if they parked in a lot across the street. Now the people across the street didn't give a damn about that. I know he was behind that because somebody told me that. So if they parked in, the lot that was across the street.
All those places were closed.
All those places were closed at night. There was a daycare, and
Right, yeah.
so they would tow the cars. So that was number 2, and there was just all kinds of things. It was just like he was making my life miserable.
So that was another impetus. To
That was like, yeah, that there was that. And then my last chef there was some things that went on with him, including he went up to my office and stole money. On one of the only 2 nights, 2 afternoons that what was the place up in Trenton that ran the jam session from 3 to 7?
Oh, Candlelight.
The Candlelight. So I got the second gig that I ever had up at the Candlelight. And Sid Simmons was on it. I go up there and play from either 2 to 6 or 3 to 7. I come back to Ortliebs and the door to the apartment's open. I go up there and somebody had rifled through my money and didn't take it all, but took about $200 out of my, my stash and $100 out of my cigarette money. I had a separate, and I didn't know who it was, but I thought I knew who it was. And later on, Joey D'Ambrosio says, "Oh no, we saw Bill coming out from your." We were walking in, and he was coming out from the office door, from the upstairs door. So
what was the last night that Ortliebs was officially open?
It was a Saturday night. It might have been January 29th of 2007.
So you had it for basically 20 years.
Just the best part of 20 years, A lot of things in my life I did. I was with Sun Oil 6 months short of 20 years, and I was there 20 years. And 2 marriages, 17.
Now, I remember that people used to tell me, I don't have any firsthand, they used to help musicians out and let them stay upstairs.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Fareed lived up there shortly after we bought the place. We had a guy do some renovation of the apartment upstairs. So it was livable, let's put it that way. It wasn't Taj Mahal, but it was livable. Had a little kitchen there and stuff. So Fareed Barron moved up there. He was there for, I don't know how long, 1.5 years, 2 years, something like that, not too long. Then later for a little while I had the Mike Hunzar, who was a kitchen helper. He rented the apartment from me. But there were a few other guys that stayed up there, not a lot. The bass player.
Jeff Lee Johnson?
No, the bass player. He always talked about Titty Boom as being, he was a real cat, He stayed up there sometimes, and maybe 1 or 2 other guys. John Simon stayed up there one weekend when I was living up there, because I had 2 sides of this thing. Somebody could sleep on the other side, but not a lot. But a few people stayed up there. I'll think of the guy that.
So what did you sell it for? And I remember the guys you sold it to.
Yeah.
How much did they pay for it? Do you remember how much?
Yeah, roughly within a 50 or 100. I sold it for. I think it was 950-ish, 950,000, and we split the transaction into 2 parts. The building, that was about 600, and they paid me for that outright. And of course, I paid off all my debts, which was 370 or 400,000. I was left with a little over 200, and that's how I bought this place. And then the other part was they paid me some up front. I forget whether it was, I don't know if it was 100 or part of 100, and they owed me 385,000 on that, and they were paying me 23 something a month, and they paid me for about 1.5 years or 2 years, and then that stopped, and so I got stiffed for about $375,000. So those people out there that think, because I know that Dylan Taylor said to me one time, he says, "Oh, I know you sold the place for 100,000." Yeah, but I never saw 400 of it.